Hi everybody. Wanted to make this little video. It's going to be about how you can improve your margins with new product development, the tooling, and manufacturing. So I think you're going to enjoy this video. So this video is being driven because I've got a small group of guys that we kind of joke that we're the League of Shadows. It's a little think tank I belong to where a couple of engineers, a couple of CEOs, kind of a group of really neat people get together and we talk about what we see in industries that's happening, and we basically talk about tech and stuff that people are missing out on. And the tech I want to talk about, since everybody knows I've gone crazy with my 3D printing, is the tooling of parts. And when you're doing new product development and you're rapid prototyping, or you're doing essentially building the machines that build the parts. Okay, so what I've done here, and I'm going to be showing you some different clips as I go through this, but this little jig here is basically lining up all the little bitty holes that have to be perfect on a carbon fiber piece I have that's going to go in my airplane, and all the holes have to align perfectly. Now if I were to take a piece of aluminum to make this hole jig and use my center punch and punch the holes, drill them out, no matter how perfect you are with the center punch, for some reason it just seems like you always you get off a little bit, and that's where you have to have your plus or minus tolerances. Okay, so the neat thing about 3D printing is it took me in AutoCAD maybe 5 minutes to draw this. I exported it, brought it into my 3D software, exported it as an STL, and then 3D printed it. And what's really neat is I printed this out of ABS. Now I'm only going to make 6 of these things for my airplane, but you definitely could use this for probably 100 to 200 drills before it would start to wear on you. Cool thing is this took less than 40 minutes to print. Okay, so start thinking about if you have something in manufacturing where you have to have a jig that's going to line up every time on every hole. Instead of having your people tool it, and I'm talking about maybe CNCing it, doing it by hand where you're going to have a tool maker basically, mark all the holes, going to sit there and spend a lot of time laying it out, going to use a center punch to mark all your points, then you're going to drill it, and then you're going to test it. That's a lot of time. One of the CEOs I was talking to in this little think tank, when it comes to them making dies and making drill jigs like this, they've gone 100% to 3D printing. And it has saved them 90% of their tooling cost. Okay, so think about what that means for your investment in your company. So one of the things we discussed was how many 3D design people do they have on staff? And I'm talking about the person who understands the power of the 3D printer, the specs that 3D printer may or may not need. There's all kinds of things that when people think of 3D printing, they think, oh, I'm going to do a rapid prototype of a spinner and that's all I'm going to use it for. Well, you're going to write that off somewhere in new product development, and it's a little bit of cost, okay? But if you've got an industrial 3D printer, well, I shouldn't even say industrial. I mean, my little 3D printer is 250 by 200 millimeters by 190 millimeters tall, I think, something like that. But when you really think about it, that means I could go up to about a 9 by 8 inch or a 10 by 9 inch drill jig off my little Prusa 3D printer for anything I'm going to do from here out. I will never ever have to use a center punch to make a template. I'm going to 3D print the template. So what I really want to share here is for you to think about if you are doing, like I needed to build some parts for my 3D printer to hold bigger spools of filament. So what did I do? I went into AutoCAD, I drew it, I 3D printed it, popped it on the printer, and it's going to probably last 5 or 10 years. or until I buy another 3D printer. I have a feeling that in 5 years from now I'll probably own 3 or 4 3D printers of different sizes, shapes, and coolness. But I really want people to think about, are you staying up with the tech? Okay, when I say tech, the changes in technology. Okay, if you are working in a manufacturing, an R&D division, if you are rapid prototyping, so many times we have to make things replicatable or repeatable. You know, I'm not going to mass produce anything, as far as I know, in my hobby. But this little guy here, and hopefully you can see it here, my entire amount of time in this was probably 15 minutes of design time. Okay? Draw it in CAD, export it, move it into 3D, extrude it out of 3D, move it into the 3D printer, and you've got, in 45 minutes of printing, so basically in an hour, I was able to produce this template, this whole jig, which is going to be able to make sure that anything I design now, the tolerances are going to be virtually perfect. Okay? One thing I do want to tell you though, when 3D printers print, they do squish just a little bit around the edges. So all these holes, while this hole is pretty much perfect, the size of my drill bit, the hole coming out the back side of it is just, I don't know, a hundredth of a millimeter smaller. So when you first put the drill through it the very first time, you're going to see just a little bit of material come out. So make sure that when you use it the very first time, you use it on some kind of a wood or something so you can make sure all your holes are clean. Because if you put it on your metal and drill through, when you come out, you're going to have some material in between it and you might wonder what's going on. Okay? So I'm going to drill some aluminum, and then I'll show that in a future video and show you just absolutely how cool this came out. I just want people to think about, when you've got a 3D printer in your company, what are you doing with it? If it's specifically for your rapid prototyping and your research and design, you are missing out on a massive amount of possibilities with it. I found out that United Launch Alliance, the people who compete with Elon Musk, all of their rocket jigs that are up to, I think, a meter. If it's more than a meter, I think they, I think what I read was 100% of their jig making that lines up for their holes being drilled are being done with a massive industrial 3D printer, which is like 100 grand. But the thing is that imagine the man hours that they're saving by 3D printing these jigs to line up where all the rivets and all the holes and everything have to be drilled in. The outside skin of rockets and stuff like that. So if you have a company, and in that company you do your own research and design, you do your own rapid prototyping, and you are mass producing parts, you really need to consider what you're doing with 3D printing. And you really need to have an expert on staff who understands everything about that 3D printer. I think what's scary from the little think tank I have that we talked about is many times they'll take an engineer, or they'll take basically just somebody in the staff and say, hey, we're getting a 3D printer, learn everything you can about it. Okay? If you haven't designed a lot in life as far as the machining side of things, think about what it does. Tool making, machining, rapid prototyping, the R&D of parts and stuff like that. There's so many things that you really need a designer. And actually the people that are being hired are basically called the designers that run the 3D printing shop. Okay? So they're not engineers, they're more designers because they have to understand how to produce this. So hope you enjoy my videos. Keep the emails coming. I got my dog visiting right here. And hope you enjoy this video. Hope it made sense. Have a great night, everybody. Take care. Bye.